basically the premise of this project is it's a social justice project for my sexuality class, and in it we are trying to like either promote an organization or promote like a common cause like in the LGBT community. So like I know some people are doing like rape culture and how it kind of gets dismissed, or and like how it could be prevalent towards either college kids or LGBT students or anything like that. Some people are doing stuff on like Black Lives Matter, and so I chose Bad Believer as like an organization to kind of pick up on. Well, and so the point here is kind of to either, you know, like make people more aware of like how religious trauma can kind of impact LGBT anyone, you know, and also to hopefully bring more members into Bad Believer as well.
Yep.
Because I feel like that's important.
Yeah.
So for starters, just I'll ask a little bit basic background. So like, what's your name, your pronouns, your identity, kind of like your journey and background, like anything that you're comfortable answering.
Yeah. Okay. Well, my name is Adaline and I go by she, her. And my background when it comes to my sexuality is I identified very, very long time as straight. I'm a minister's daughter, so grew up in a system where I think that it just wasn't even on my radar. And I think that the longer I'm in Bad Believer and the longer that I hear more stories, the more common it seems that that is something that is a bit of a thread that people are, you're not allowed to think that. So you don't even allow yourself the possibility of it because it's just off the table. So for a very long time, and there was, you know, very much a lack in media for me. I didn't really see any of that growing up. I didn't see queer relationships. I wasn't in any way involved in queer culture as being very shielded within sort of like this religious environment. So I was just very much like unaware of any kind of option other than just being straight. And then as I got older and I started exploring more of who I was outside of the church, I then, you know, started meeting more and more gay people and starting to get more access and more comfortability within the queer culture. And that would probably be when I started to notice there were parts of me that weren't as straight as I thought. And I just sort of, that tension of trying to explore it while simultaneously dealing with the narratives of my past with the church and sort of these sort of allowances and what's not allowed, that of course is a tension that is super hard to navigate. And I tried really hard when I first noticed that I was attracted to women to try not to judge it and just try to like be intrigued by it and to go, oh, that's interesting, and to follow that thread without necessarily having to curb it. And I tried really hard to do that. And I think by following that thread as honestly as I could, I did come to a place where I had to acknowledge that I wasn't straight.
Yeah. I totally get you being there. Yeah. With like just religion and everything. And it's very like black and white. There's no like in between with it.
Yes.
So that's very. So what made you like start Bad Believer? Like what is it? What is Bad Believer and what made you start it?
Yeah. Bad Believer is a nonprofit organization that provides resources, therapy referral, and most of all community to people in the LGBTQ plus group that have been, you know, it's healing from some religious trauma and spiritual trauma, growing up in church systems where they were told that how they love is an abomination, or this scary concept of judgment for people in that group from God in the afterlife. All of these things that we kind of take those things on and really aren't afraid to acknowledge the ways in which those narratives are very harmful, the ways in which those narratives destroy lives. And we are a part of reclaiming our spiritual lives as queer people. It is possible for you to be queer and spiritual, and even to go so far as being queer and Christian. Like, it is possible. And I think that for a really long time, I didn't think it was. And I started Bad Believer because while I was going through my own journey, I found that around my queer community, people thought that it was weird that I still wanted to go to church or that I wanted to explore that part of me. Like that felt like in some capacities, there were times where I felt like they felt it was a betrayal for me to even want to go there. So I didn't feel like I fully fit in there. And then of course, I definitely didn't feel like I fit in my church community. So I felt very much in the middle. And I wrote a little bit about that in this. I released a song called Ghost, and I wrote in the description of the YouTube video just a bit about feeling in the middle, being like, hey, is anyone else feeling this tension? And the response was just outrageous, like just amazing. So many people were just DM'd me and said, yeah, like this is exactly what I'm going through. And from that, I realized I wasn't alone. And I thought, if I've felt this isolated, then there's no way I'm not the only one. Like there's got to be a lot of us. So I put up a sign-up sheet to start these Zoom calls for us to just really talk about it. And the response was overwhelming. It was just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people signing up for these calls, and thousands of people sending me messages about feeling like they're in the same boat. So from then it just naturally took shape, and we started doing these calls. And the next thing I knew, we had a community. And I often will get credit for a lot of things in this. And I guess like I started it, so I understand that there is going to be some of that credit given to me. But in all honesty, the community aspect of this group goes so far beyond me. I mean, I just facilitated calls and tried to find a way to get people connected, but it is the quality of connection and the quality of humans that are in this community that are just showing up for each other, to love, to accept, to be there. It is the most accepting group of people I've ever been around. And that's what makes them special, is because they just show up every day for each other. And it's incredible to witness.
Oh, for sure. Like,
yeah,
I remember doing the group call and everything. And it's like, you made a very safe space for it, which was really like just absolutely lovely. And I definitely think that helps more people show up for sure. Cause it's like, you make a safe space and you make it known this is a safe space, and more people are more inclined to kind of be like, okay, I feel comfortable doing this.
Yeah. And for a lot of people, it's the first safe space they've ever been in.
For
because,
sure.
like
Yeah.
I said, queer spaces are not always safe.
And especially coming from like a church background, it's very much, you're not used to that.
No, it's a place to be seen. Being churched and queer is a very unique journey. And it's not that we want to be so like, oh, no one can understand us, that we slip into this like trap of not being able to identify. But we do want to know that there are times where we can just settle into the comfort of knowing we don't have to explain ourselves. We just get each other. I think it's super important for humans to have moments like that where they don't have to explain. Like it's just like we all understand. Or when people bring up how they're feeling, to have that part of your soul that goes, oh my God, yes, like that's how I felt. And I think that's why, and we just did a retreat, actually. We just had our first Bad Believer retreat. And a lot of people saying at the end of that retreat, and it was really powerful and meaningful, but people just saying, this is the first time I felt safe. You can't put a price tag on that. You can't put worth on that. Like, it's just like an incredible thing.
Oh yeah. Did you ever expect Bad Believer to take off like this? Like, how does it feel just seeing how much it's grown from what you had expected it to?
No, like I've only been out for a year and a half. Like, I just feel like it was only a year and a half ago that I was like in crippling pain and just thinking about destroying my family's lives and destroying my relationship with my family. It wasn't that long ago. It wasn't that long ago that I was
a year and a half. I didn't even realize it had been that like I thought about it because I remember it, and then I was like, that's been a year and a half already? Like that feels like yesterday kind of thing.
I know. It's just like, yeah, I know. It's so funny because it feels like a short amount of time, but it also feels like a really long amount of time. It's so wild, like to think of how much has happened in a year and a half. You know, like especially with my family, something that not everybody knows, which is incredible, is, obviously was really worried about coming out to my minister father and, well, to everyone in my family. And we're on a journey still, I think, of trying to understand each other, and that's natural. It takes time for families to understand. But what really blew me away, which I would not have had the opportunity to see, oh, I feel emotional. I wouldn't have had the opportunity to see without Bad Believer, is I kept feeling like I was doing the best thing for my parents by shielding them, because I was just like, the truth will destroy them.
The less they know, the better. Like,
exactly. But what I didn't realize is that by telling them the truth, and when I told my parents that day, my dad said, "This is a beautiful day for our family because now there are no more secrets." And what I didn't realize is that by telling them, I would allow them to go on their own journey that has really been life-changing for them. Like, my dad teaches a Bible study in Bad Believer now. I just was mentioning how we had a lot of Christians in the community who had just never been able to go to a church because they felt so persecuted from the moment they stepped in. And my dad was like, "Well, that's not right. I'll teach them," because my dad has a PhD in theology. I was like, "What?" Like, and if I had it, like, and what it made me realize was that the love that my parents have for me is even deeper than I even thought possible. And if I hadn't had opened up and told them the truth, and if I hadn't allowed them to go on this journey, and for Bad Believer to be what it is, and for me to not hide Bad Believer from them, I wouldn't have been able to see this growth in my father, where he's, despite maybe not understanding, or maybe not necessarily being in the same space as far as some theological differences, still sort of going, "This is wrong. Like, these people should not be told that God is not accessible to them because of their sexual orientation." So yeah, it's been incredible for me personally. And then obviously it's been really incredible for some people in our group too, like, just like life-saving in some situations.
absolutely. That's amazing. I was not, like, I wasn't even aware of that. That's so cool.
Yeah, I haven't like advertised it through the group as much because I didn't want, it was more like people will articulate a need to me. So I've had a couple people be like, "Oh, I really miss Bible study." And I just felt like I heard that like from like 15 different people. So I was like, well, I didn't want to do a big sign up sheet and be like, "Take Bible study with my dad." But
Right.
and it's,
Understandable.
yeah, and it's tricky because, there's also the complexity of the fact that he's not affirming yet. So I needed to make sure that everyone in that group felt very safe with understanding that my dad's on his own journey too. And this is what's so incredible about people in Bad Believer. There is an uncanny and unparalleled, from what I've seen around me, ability for us to hold space for each other's journeys in a really beautiful way. Like, we have people who are Christian in our group, we have people who are atheist, we have people who are pagan, we have agnostic, we have a lot of different groups, a lot of beliefs. We have side A Christians, we have side B Christians, we have people from all over different like places in the field, but we just allow that to be what it is. Like, we don't feel this need to have to change opinions. We can just hold space. So the people in Bad Believer are holding space for my dad to say, he's on his journey yet. Maybe we don't agree on all of the like fine print on some of this, but we can commune in a way that is beneficial for everyone, and also just love where everyone's at.
Which is amazing.
That's not normal.
Yeah, and it's like what you said earlier with like the acceptance, like even with that situation, like there's still the acceptance of like, you are who you are, and like you're safe here, like regardless of. Yeah. And that's incredible.
Yeah, and because we hold space, because they know what it feels like to have someone hold space for their processing, they're then able to offer that extension of love to someone like my father. So I think it's just like this exchange. The other thing that I find very amazing about our group and very unique is that we're also extremely welcoming to all sexual preferences and identities, because like I've experienced, as someone that's bisexual, a lot of like, I'm not gay enough to even be able to like operate in this space. And to be honest,
but
like,
they're not straight enough either, and it's like, okay.
Yeah, but and outside of Bad Believer, there have been whispers, and I have heard whispers of people being like, who is she to lead this group? Like, who is she? Like, she's not even gay, or like there's these ideas. And I'm like, I've been in love with women. Like I don't know, how much more gay do I have to be in order to be able to
You're
have
the
like,
B in the LGBTQ.
yeah, I literally have a letter. But yeah, it's not enough. But one thing that's beautiful about our group is we have a lot of people who identify as lots of different things, and people who have changed what they're attracted. Like, it's noticing different preferences starting to creep in.
Right.
And they're like, oh, and we're just all about like follow that. In fact, I've said many times, I want us to be the kind of group that even if someone in our group was like, hey, you know what I'm realizing is that I don't think I'm gay at all anymore. I think that or maybe not that they're not gay, or like they're like, I'm feeling attracted to men, like to cis men. And for us to go, awesome, good for you. Because the only prerequisite there is to be a part of the community and like the sense of identity is that we all have felt shamed in a religious institution around our sexual orientation. Sexual orientation is really fluid. It changes. Like, there are things that I didn't ever think that I would be. I'm like, oh, I don't think that would be a scenario I would be into. And then all of a sudden, 3 years later, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm super into it. I mean, we grow. And I think that in Bad Believer, we're just like, it's not about your sexual preference or orientation. It is about the fact that you have trauma from this system that you're healing. So it's none of my business who you go to bed with. It's none of any of our businesses. But I find that extremely refreshing, because I think a lot of queer spaces don't.
True, yeah.
Go that way.
So it's like you've got just that community aspect of just, like that no matter at the end of the day, like you have people in your corner to just like be there.
Yeah. If things are said in love, there's not one thing you could say in our group that would get you thrown out. Other than like violating community guidelines, like you have to be nice, and like you have to operate within like the framework of the community.
There's boundaries, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm saying if you're struggling with something, like something that would be like, you're like, oh gosh, there's this thing about me that feels really vulnerable and I'm scared to share. There's nothing that could come out of your mouth that would be a problem.
For sure.
Nice.
So what are some of the biggest challenges with continuing this organization? Like, how do you reach people?
Yeah, so I would say the evolution of Bad Believer, the biggest challenge for sure was that we had a very, very fast onboarding, like hundreds of people within a month. Like, just, like in a normal situation, you like have this idea of what you want to create, and then you just like, it's really about building awareness. With Bad Believer, it was like the train was going down the tracks, and I was just like trying to throw train track in front of the train. So it felt a little bit like what was hard, and something that still is something I'm trying to figure out, was that there wasn't enough of an infrastructure in place at the very beginning to be able to kind of cater and to get everyone feeling really connected, everyone who's had a call. Now the pace has slowed. So now we have a welcome team, we have a peer support team, we have Discord, we have follow-up calls, we have community events, we have therapy referral programs, we have therapists on staff, we have a board. Like, we're officially a nonprofit now, but at the beginning we had hundreds of people coming in at the same time. So the challenge for me was like, I need help. I just met these people a week ago. Who do I trust? I had to use a lot of my gut just to be like, I'm getting a sense that I can really trust this person, so I'm going to ask them. But it was just a very scary thing to kind of have to trust people really early in. And some of those situations worked out, some of them didn't. And that's just life. And I think that that's what's been so amazing about learning this, is going, none of this process is going to be perfect, but the intentions behind it are pure. And anyone that's been a part of this knows, who's a part of like being on Discord, or just a part of the community, or who was at the retreat, you cannot deny the purity of the intentions. So we just do the best that we can. We're going to make mistakes. That's going to happen. But our intention is to love. So as far as I'm concerned, intentions are everything. And we all have grace for each other to figure things out as we go. but if the intentions are good, you can't fail. So now that the kind of onboarding from like mostly from Winona Earp, now that that's like, because that's really what it was, like a lot of people who were watching that show and heard my song, and there was like that sort of explosion. Now I feel like we're at a point in our organization where we're going to be going beyond that one narrative. So it won't just be that everyone who's in the group is there because of Winona Earp or because they heard Ghost. Like, it's going to be reaching people who don't have any idea who I am, reaching people who don't have any idea what Winona Earp is. And that is that will be like phase 2 of Bad Believer. And that's kind of, I think, what we're gearing up for now. For a really long time, I felt like, listen, I don't think we should be pushing to like try to find a whole bunch of new people right now. We need to take care of the people we have. We have a lot of people. Like I've done like 575 calls. Like, wow, we have a lot of people. Like, and to be honest, some of those people I haven't been in touch with in a long time. They're not super engaged right now. And I want to know why. Like, is there something I can do more to help that person? We don't need to like expand necessarily at a rapid rate. Like, I'd like to slow down, look at who we have in our bubble and go, is everyone okay here? And once we do a check-in and we get the sense, because people are going to come and go, that happens. But if we know that, okay, we've done a check-in, everyone that we have in our umbrella is feeling great, I think then that's a great time to start expanding, because of course we want to expand, and not for any kind of glory, but because people are hurting. And we have this community of people just sitting there waiting to love. And so of course we want to move into that next phase. So it is kind of like there is some strategy involved, just making sure that people are taken care of and then expanding out.
Right. Cause like I can speak personally in terms of like, you and I had our call back in probably about June. It's November now. And there was like a period where like I wasn't super active for a minute. And then like I had no fear of coming back in and being like, oh, are they still gonna like accept me? Or are they gonna kind of be like, oh, you've been a little inactive recently? Like, you know, like there was none of that. It was instantly just, I was like, hey, I've been gone for a minute, but I'm back now. And everyone was like, hey, welcome back. Like, it was just, and like I started small groups. And that was instantly accepting. And it was like, I didn't feel weird about the fact that I might not have as much knowledge on the organization as some people, or as much just being there was just nice.
Yeah. Oh gosh, we're never like, when I see people come back in, I swear my thought is never, well, where have they been? My thought is like, yay, like, hey, like, you're here. It is not realistic to think that someone is going to be like, you know what, we might have some people in Bad Believer who are in Discord every day. Some of us are. I'm there every day. Like, and that'll be our whole lives. But that's not realistic. The reality is people have stuff happen. They pop in, they pop out. My big thing, which I really try to do in the newsletter, is I always try to make the point of saying, like, if haven't been around, you're always welcome back. I mean, one of my favorite Bible stories is the one of the prodigal son. And I think that, like, not that the people in our group are prodigal sons, but that sort of idea that, like, the arms are always open to come back. There's no judgment if you need to step away and come back. Like, I just want everyone to be okay. When people step away, my thought is more like, I hope they're okay. When they come back, I'm always like, awesome. Like, there's never a thought of, there's no judgment in that. Well, why should there be? I mean, we're all grown-ups. Life gets busy.
Right.
Yeah. Pop in and pop out as much as you want. It's just like, just knowing it's there is, I think, what's important.
Yeah. Just knowing like the open arms are there. It's like, that's what really just cements it too.
Yep. And like, we want people to be engaged, but that's mostly just because it's so awesome. Right. The retreat was just insane.
Man, yeah. I was hoping to go to it too, but it was just, life got crazy, but it looked like fun too.
Next time, it was very, very special. And that's why we want people to be there, because we want everyone to feel that kind of love. That's it. We're not like a sneaky evangelical group. Like, we're not like, ooh, perfect, let's get him back so we can get him into church. Like, that's not the goal. The goal is just for people to feel safe and loved. And that's the reward. Like there's no better reward in life than when you're in an environment like that and people are saying, this is the first time I felt safe. This is the first time I felt loved. Like that's like, when I get out of bed, that's the story I think of, and that allows me to get back to work. Like that's why we do it. So yeah, people are always welcome to pop in and pop out as much as they want.
Awesome. So we kind of spoke about this a little bit at the beginning, but how do you think that something like religion and religious household, like growing up in a religious household, how do you think that impacts a person who isn't LGBTQ? But then how do you also think it impacts someone who is? Like, what do you think the underlying difference there is?
I think it impacts them really similarly in the sense that there is an indoctrinated belief system. So people that aren't queer are going to walk around with this thing like it's like that's wrong. Now, of course, it's not going to affect them the same, because if you're gay and you know that it's wrong, then you're like sitting at home every night trembling under the covers. If you're straight and you think it's wrong, it's more like a knowledge you walk around with. But that's dangerous, because you're going to, whether you want to or not, there is a level of judgment there that's just existing. It's kind of like a privilege. There's like a privileged energy of like, oh, well, that's wrong. It's like, oh, can you imagine what it feels like to be told that the way you love is wrong? And I know all the arguments. I know them all, like recite them all. I know all the non-affirming positions. But one thing I say all the time is the non-affirming positions, as much as you might say, well, you know, like it's like any other sin. It's like drinking or like being an addict or like, you know, those things are wrong and you figure it out. It's like the only thing I can say to all of that is that there's very little sin that you can see that is similar to this sort of sin that they're projecting onto the queer community. Because when queer people find a space in which they feel safe and they don't feel like they're going to hell, or they don't feel, they actually thrive. And the whole point of the Bible, the whole point of it is that there is an intuitive system within you that tells you what's right and wrong. And the evidence of it is something that people call the fruits of the Spirit. So when you're engaging in a way that is good for you as a human, which is why there are laws of God, the laws of God in general make sense. It's like if you are hurting yourself, you're going to start to feel your body wither. You're going to start to feel your body die. I've had substance abuse problems. I didn't feel good. I knew I needed to change something because my intuitive system was like, something's off. When our people stop beating themselves up for being gay, you see them bloom. You see the fruits of the Spirit. You see peace and joy, happiness, self-control, all of the things that we talk about in church as being important. That's what happens when people stop beating themselves up for being gay. What happens when people beat themselves up for being gay is that they die. So you can have all the theological arguments in the world, but if there isn't a pastoral way to apply your argument, it doesn't make sense. So yeah. Like, that's just the bottom line.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So people from that system that grow up, they're not gay, they might have arguments, but again, those people, straight people from church systems, they need to have gay friends. That's important. Even if your position is non-affirming, it is very unchristian to not have a gay friend. That's unchristian. So get a gay friend, have conversations, and see what happens to your spirit. Because I already know what happens.
For sure, yeah. No, yeah. I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
So like, despite the trauma from religion, do you think it's still possible to keep your love for God and develop a healthy relationship with the church even after everything? Like, I know we kind of touched on that earlier, but how do you feel about that?
Oh yeah, it is possible. Now, it's not possible for everyone. We talk a lot about how it is possible. Sorry, I'll clarify. It is absolutely possible to come from a church system in which you were discarded and have and reclaim and develop your relationship with God. I think that is always possible. What is not always possible is for those people to go back to church. Not everyone should go back to church. there are plenty of ways to go to church without going into a church building. I think that when we have discussions about God in our group, I think that's a form of church. There are affirming churches that you can go to that are welcoming, and just knowing that you are there without judgment and they're fully accepted, that can be a very healing experience. It was for me. The first time I went to an affirming church, I just wept the whole time. It was the first time I felt close to God in a very long time. But I haven't experienced some of the levels of trauma as some of the people in our group have, especially ones that have gone through conversion therapy experiences. Stepping back into a church, you don't need to do that. And maybe you shouldn't. So I think it's about reading your body and seeing how you feel. I have stepped back into churches and I felt like I needed to run out the door. And if I do that, I run out the door. Just listen. There's been other times I've stepped into churches and I feel my body relax a bit and I'm like, okay. So I think it's really just, but you don't have to go to church to be spiritual, and you don't have to go to church to be a believer, or you don't have to go to church to have a relationship with God. I fully, fully believe that if there is a God out there who knows the amount of trauma that you've gone through, that there's going to be a level of understanding. If there's a God of the utmost emotional intelligence, that God is going to understand your pain on a level that we could never understand. So you're good. You're good.
Right.
Yeah.
There's that understanding there. It's good.
Yeah. If your body is spasming, don't go.
Yeah. Just don't push it. Just whatever, comfort.
Yeah. And God's not going to be like, oh, come on. Just
push through it.
Ignore your bodies. Don't ignore your trauma signs. No, read those cues. I think the bigger thing is just to be careful to not think that you don't deserve to believe in what you want to believe, or deserve to explore that. And that's really what our group is about, is saying you are worthy of whatever relationship with God you want, or not relationship, but that it is your choice and you should feel empowered to have that.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you believe that the awareness on religious trauma in the LGBTQ community, do you think it's spreading around the community, or do you think that religious trauma is still relatively unknown or unheard about? Because I know for a while people were kind of like, religious trauma, no, it's that's not what the issue was, even if it was. So how common do you think that how that religious trauma is, and do you think that awareness of it is better or worse than it was before?
Within the queer community or outside of it?
I think both could be
relatively. I think in just general society, not queer communities, I think that there is a lack of awareness of the amount of trauma that's going on. I think that because society is becoming more queer affirming, and because we're starting to see more media representation, I think a lot of people who are unchurched would be like, oh yeah, things are better. No, things aren't better. It is better. Okay, I'll give it somewhat of that. There are more affirming churches than there ever have been, but it's a very small percentage of churches are affirming. So we still have people living in conservative parts of America that have to call in from their car, because if the church knew they were gay, they would be kicked out. They'd be kicked out of their homes. And I know this is true because Bad Believer's only been around for a year. So in the last year, 40% of the people are calling from their cars with that story. Another 40% had that story, but have moved past it. So there's really probably only 5 to 10% of our community who haven't had these extreme situations where they were like, it's either my life or my family. So it is a problem. It's a big problem, and it's happening now. In the queer community, I definitely think the queer community knows that the church has harmed people. But with the queer community, I think there's the opposite problem, where there's so much hatred towards the church and so much hatred towards to Christians that our queer Christians are being targeted as sort of like betraying or traitors. Yeah. So I definitely think the queer community does not like the church. So I think what needs to happen on that side is I think the queer community needs to understand that there are affirming churches and that not all churches are bad. So we have extreme problems on extreme ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Like it's like there needs to be some kind of like meet in the middle, but getting to that middle point is what's like the issue. It's like that's the hard part.
Well, yeah, I mean, like the United States is alone. If you just, I'm not American, but we all watch from outside, and we're just like, it perfectly it demonstrates this exact problem.
Right.
Polarizing views. So we need more people to look to the middle in general, like beyond even queer issues. Like we all need to do what we can to try to understand where someone is coming from, as hard as it might be.
Yeah. So on a happier, brighter note, how has Bad Believer like changed your life?
Bad Believers changed my life as kids given me a whole new purpose. I would never have imagined that this would be my life. I always dreamt of being involved in a nonprofit space in some way. But I mean, if you had told me 3 years ago that I was going to found a nonprofit for people with religious trauma who are gay, I'd be like, what? No, there's no way that's going to happen. But that's one of the beautiful things about life is if you're open to it and willing to go where it leads you, I do think it takes you to where you need to go. So it's changed my life in the sense that it's given me new purpose. It's given me a new reason to get out of bed in the morning. But one thing that's really changed my life that I don't think as many people realize is like, I needed that support. I need the community. Yes, I'm the founder, and yes, like there's these things, but I'm just a girl that came from the same system, who has the same fears, who wonders what she believes, that knows that I've reconciled. I don't believe that there's a hell, but that sometimes in the dark of the night, I still have those feelings. Sometimes I still get scared. So having this group of people there for me has been huge. So I'm getting just as much out of the community aspect as other people are, even though I'm like more involved in the organization side of it.
For sure. Yeah. No, I can totally see that. Yeah. So what do you hope that the future for Bad Believer will look like? Like, say you were looking at it like 6 months down the road, a year down the road, 10 years down the road, like, how are you wanting this community to look?
It's a good question. I think I'm in the process right now of really trying to figure that out, because I would say up until this point, Bad Believer has become what it wanted to be. I've really just been like following it. Like, oh, because when I started the calls, I was like, oh, maybe I'll just have calls. And then I'll do maybe have like a resource sheet. And then but then all those people were like, no, we want to keep talking. And then they all started that first call, the very first call I have, they talk every week for the last year, that initial call. They still are together. So the community just built. And then I thought, oh gosh, it's a community. Okay. now let's organize that. Okay, let's organize that. So in some ways, I think it dictates itself. I would love for it to, I love that it's a community. There are unique challenges of it being a community, obviously, but I'd rather us deal with those challenges than not have the community aspect of it. It's really important. So I'd love for it to grow in the sense that there's more and more people coming in and feeling this like love and support around them. We have therapy referral programs. I would love at some point for us to be able to offer therapy like through the organization directly. Because right now our therapy, we do have a therapist on our board, but we just don't have like the liability and all the stuff set up in order to do that direct. But at some point, I'd love for us to be able to offer direct therapy services. More and more resources. I'd love for us to be really visible on social media. I'm doing a podcast, so which I had to kind of put on hold because we were really focused again on getting the community aspect solidified. But eventually I want that podcast to be something that has a far, far reach, so that people in non-affirming churches are hearing, oh, did you hear about Bad Believer? Again, not to be famous, but because we want people to stop hurting. And I also think that will help. Like, I want to go on TV shows. I want to talk about this problem. I'm working on a documentary right now. I want to do more stuff like that. Like, I'm not producing the documentary. I'm working with a production company in LA, where we're kind of like developing an idea about affirming churches, focusing more on that. And I want to focus on, yes, there's a problem, but I do want us to focus on some solutions, like to support affirming churches, to support the people in our community who want to go to these churches, and to have as much support as possible for multiple belief systems in Christianity, outside of Christianity, just like be a hub of spiritual options for people who are from the LGBTQI community.
Yeah, for sure. Because like even outside of Christianity, like there's other religions where it's just like this is still a problem regardless. And so it's like
a lot of our people are Christian, but we do have people in our community from like that are Muslim, and we have people that are from Jehovah's Witness background. We have people who are from Mormon backgrounds. So we have lots of different people. And there are, of course, congregations and churches within those organizations that would be slightly affirming, but some of like the Mormon faith is not chill with it. Jehovah's Witnesses not chill with it. So I want to be able to get to the point where we have a big enough staff that we're doing those digging and finding, is there an affirming Mormon church? Let's find it.
For sure, yeah.
And if we can't find it, we can't find it. But I don't want people to have to abandon their faith if that's something that's important to them just because they're gay. Like,
no, exactly.
And you might want to abandon it. Fine. But like some people don't. And that's what the whole thing is that everyone assumes that if you're gay, you want to abandon your faith. That is not the case. We have to stop assuming that.
For sure, yeah. Because like, I mean, for me, like I grew up Christian, Catholic, and I definitely didn't want to have to abandon that. But I knew I had to take a step back for a minute because it was getting harmful. But like the last thing I wanted to do was abandon it, even if I felt like I had to. So it was like, I totally get what you mean, where it's like growing up that way really like is important to who you are. Like it kind of crafts who you are, and you don't want to get rid of that completely.
That's it. And everyone it's shocking, but almost everyone that's come into the group, one of the common narratives is it was never God that was the problem for me. It was humans projecting this stuff onto me. A lot of the people in our group, shockingly, it's a miracle actually, still have a really close relationship with God, in spite of like the narratives that the church have been giving them. They're like, yeah, they said that, but I don't know, for some reason I've always felt good with God. Like, that's interesting. So to me, I'm like, we should follow that thread, because I think that's a pretty remarkable thing, to be persecuted heavily, but to still be connected to God is a miracle.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Because I think it just stems down to like everyone has their own belief on who God is and like what God believes, even if it doesn't completely align with their beliefs. And so like it's definitely amazing to be able to see that still like blossom out of all of the trauma and all of the issues that start.
Yeah,
for sure. And like you were saying about the community, I mean, even now during this call, my Discord's been blowing up with the little small, like Bad Believer small group, just like, are we meeting next Tuesday? Are we still meeting? Like, what's going on? And it was just perfect timing to be like, oh,
okay. I love that.
I love it. It's great. So what do you believe that the best parts of the community are? Like, what would you say to someone to get them to want to join?
I would say to people that want to join that, there is a home for you. There is a found family here. People who will understand why maybe you don't want to abandon your faith. so that when your queer friends make you feel embarrassed or uncomfortable about your belief in God, we won't do that to you. Like, you can just chill here. Or if you're with your family and your Christian family and they're making you feel like you're not worthy of even stepping into the building with them, like, well, you can come to Bible study here. Like, it's just, again, like we've been saying earlier, it's a safe place to explore, to be seen, to be safe, and to know that you're not alone. That's the most powerful thing. Humans are not meant to be alone. Whether you believe in the Bible or not, it's one of the very original scriptures. It said, it's not good for man to be alone. So I think that for churches, you can't make people feel alone and expect them to thrive. It's like anti-biblical to do that. And that's the ultimate irony about the church, is that the church isn't acting very Christian right now. So my comment would be, start acting more like Jesus if that's really what you believe. And for the queer people in the community to know that there's nothing wrong with you, that you are perfectly and wonderfully made, and that there's a group of people just waiting here to love you.
For sure, yeah. So how can people, LGBTQ plus, or even just an ally, just a straight ally, you know, how can people help with this cause and with this organization?
So if people want to get involved, they can come to our Instagram, which is Bad Believer Community, and there's a link there for people to sign up for initial calls. So usually it starts with an initial call with me and a couple other people. If that's uncomfortable, though, if you're like, I don't know if I want to meet with her, there are other people in the community you can meet with. We just like everyone who's coming in to have a call, so we can just like make sure that it stays safe for everybody in the community. And if you're an ally, we welcome allies too, to like be involved, obviously. But I guess one of the ways that people can support, which is just getting set up now, is we just got our approval from the US government to be an official organization now. So now is really when we're going to start setting up abilities for people to donate. So if they have the means to help, that'll go towards our referral program, our therapy referrals. It'll go towards like events and speakers and the podcast, just kind of getting as much, you know, all of these things cost money, unfortunately. So just kind of allowing us to grow out that way. And then eventually, hopefully, being able to provide for people in our community if something is going on with them. So again, still just in the early stages of getting all of that set up, as we just were approved recently. But people can know that within the next couple months, there'll be more like tangible ways to be able to give. And in the meantime, just spreading awareness. If there's a family or friend or someone that you know that you think this would be helpful for, just to sort of give them our information and keep that conversation going.
For sure, which is amazing. I'm so glad that you guys got approved. That makes me so happy.
I know, it's wild. It's so crazy because again, it feels like it's been forever, but then sometimes I have to have moments where I'm like, we just celebrated our 1 year in September, like almost early October. Right. So this has all happened in a year, basically.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, is there anything that you want to mention, anything that I might have missed, or just anything you want to add?
I don't think so. I feel like your questions are really great. And I think really covered what Bad Believer is. And, you know, obviously at the end, you were just asking, like, how can people find us and all of those sorts of things. So yeah, no, I think I'm trying to think right now if there's anything that I feel like we missed, but I think it was pretty good.
Perfect. So glad to hear.